the biggest transformation for me, even early on, was a mental one, because I started to really take responsibility for the fact that I had a lack of self-control and discipline in the way I eat. Some of my other habits, like what I drank for hydration, were not good for me. They were just essentially extra meals worth of calories without having any significant, fuel for my body. So those things were things I had to change the way I related to food. And I think in one of your Fit Father Project podcasts, you talk about how food really is fuel, and you wouldn't put, really lousy fuel in a really expensive sports car. So why would you do that to your own body? In this process, as I get going in Fit Mother Project, it wasn't about restricting myself. It was just about making some really good decisions that were far better for me than where I was.
Hey there, my friend. It's Dr. Anthony Balduzzi from the Fit Mother Project, and I want to welcome you back to another amazing episode here on the podcast. In just a few moments, you're going to hear a conversation between myself and one of our Fit Mother program members, Kristen Pewitz. Kristen is a 46-year-old mom of 3. She's been married for 22 years, worked as a nurse, currently homeschooling her kids. She has a lot going on. And in 2020, just a little over, let's just say a year and a half ago, Kristen made the commitment to dramatically improve her health. She decided that enough was enough. She didn't want to be overweight anymore. And at the time of beginning our Fit Mother program, Kristen was tipping the scales at around 230 pounds at a height of 5'7". And over the course of basically a year, Kristen gets down to around 135 pounds. She lost over 90 pounds. And this is after years of struggling with nutrition, trying fad diets, stuff's not working for her. Kristen was able to make a full shift, certainly physically, but more importantly, I think we're going to hear from this conversation, is mentally, spiritually, emotionally too. She got herself completely on track. She reinvigorated her life. And there's just so many amazing lessons from this conversation that I'm excited to share with you. So without further ado, let's get Kristen on the podcast and we can hear her amazing story. All right, Kristen, welcome officially to the Fit Mother Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. So glad to be here.
So to kick this off, I know we have a lot to cover and you have such a beautiful story. And I mentioned this to you before we hit record that you were like a poster child for the FMP because of the transformation you made on so many levels. Before we get into your Fit Mother journey, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everyone listening, your name, your age, where you're from, and a little bit about your family. And then we're going to get into your Fit Mother journey.
All right. Well, my name is Kristen Pewitz. I'm 46 years old this December. I am from Texas originally and kind of settled in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we're just in a little small suburb of Fort Worth, Texas called Hazlet, Texas, and kind of country with little cows and little horses. My family consists of my husband, Ron, who I've been married to for 22 years. He's a software engineer. As a previous career, I was a nurse, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I have 3 fantastic girls that keep us busy. Ashley's 17, Hannah's 15, and Ellie is 13, and I homeschooled them for the last 3.5 years, so it has kept me very busy.
Totally. And what year did you start your Fit Mother transformation? In 2020, I believe.
I actually started in 2020, August 31st. I was at church in May and had a friend that was doing it, my music minister at church there. And he had been doing it for about 3 months. And I said, look, man, what are you doing? What's happening for you that's working? Because I'm seeing it happen right in front of me. And he had lost about 25, 30 pounds. And he said, Fit Father Project. And a friend had told him about it. And I got home that night, hopped on my computer and looked and found that the Fit Mother was the complement to the Fit Father program. And he was 10 years my junior. And I thought, I'm not sure I can do this, but I'm really, really excited about it. So talked to my best friend about it. And she was looking for a change too. So we hopped on August 31st and never looked back. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, before we get into what actually took from sign up and then to go on to losing over 90 pounds, which is amazing, I want to know about what brought you to that point in 2020. What were you feeling with your health at this point? What had been going on with your health, your mindset, and kind of where were you at?
May of 2020, I'm about 5'7", and I was about 235 pounds at my heaviest there. And I started really kind of looking at the fact that I'm midlife already. I'm not in a place where I can continue the pattern of old habits that I have. I've got to make a change. I was lacking a lot of energy. I wasn't happy in lots of places in my life. And that lack of contentment was affecting my marriage and my family and my relationships with people on the outside. My brother had died the fall of the year before. And so, the patterns of emotional eating that I had then just hit overdrive, and I gained an extra 15, 20 pounds in about 6 months. So I knew I needed to change. The way that I was living my life wasn't a place I could continue, because I was going to eat myself to death, really. I mean, that's what it looks like, with all of the chronic issues that were starting to happen. I would try to work out in the yard. We have about an acre here, and I would do all the yard work. And I was trying to dig up a tree one day, and I hurt my neck pretty severely just trying to get it out of the ground. Led to MRIs and physical therapy and some other things. And not that couldn't have happened if I had been healthy, but I think it would have been far less likely. And because of that, because I was trying to do a lot of things that I just wasn't physically able to do anymore, I started really sinking into a place of significant discouragement, which, looking back, I feel like I was probably depressed. And I'm a bit of a pessimist anyway. So, if you're already a very deeply emotional person like me, and then you have a lot of negative responses to things, there it is. I'm feeding my negative emotions with food because it's a temporary gratification of that. But really, it just leads to kind of a cyclical behavior of feeding something that makes you feel worse to then feeding it again because you feel worse. And I knew I needed help to get out of that. So,
and you see this sign at church through the music minister.
Yeah.
And you're like, maybe there's at least like, maybe there's a chance. And like, I want to know that there's a chance. So
exactly.
if you see this sign, you inquire, and there's a Fit Mother Project. And you also enroll your friend Claire with you, which I think was very smart.
Yes.
And so what happens in like this first week to 2 weeks as you're starting to get going on this new plan? I imagine there's in the background of your mind some thoughts about, can I actually do this? Like, I've tried weight loss before, some of these thoughts, but at the same time, you also choose to proceed and choose to like start to learn. So what is it like in that very early bit of time when you have this baggage of emotions? You have a lot of baggage of extra weight, but you think there's a glimmer of hope that you can get going. Let's talk about the very early first 1, 2, 3 weeks starting on the program.
Right before the program had started, I had started walking. I could see a little bit of my weight fluctuate. I lost about 7 pounds, but I was just doing it on my own. And I had done Weight Watchers and keto and some other things in the past on my own. And I could see that I didn't have the knowledge, the education, the expertise to be able to see what that was going to take, except I knew that just exercise alone without changing my diet was not going to go anywhere. So going into Fit Mother, and the way you laid out the perfect plate, and here are all the educational aspects of what nutrition actually looks like, and the breakdowns of macros, including the complex carbs, and what a healthy carb versus a poorer version of a carb might be, like pastas and breads and things like that on a regular basis, what those would do to you and how your insulin spikes. And I learned so much of this information straight out in front. And I love structure, and I love to be able to kind of control my environment. So that was fantastic, because it felt like you were equipping me right from the very beginning on how exactly to do that. But I was also a little bit of a lazy cook. I had a hard time really putting those things into practice without a lot of effort. And so that's probably where my biggest stumbling block was, I need to know what this is going to look like for me. But because I'm married and because I have 3 children, I don't want to make my decisions necessarily their decisions without giving them an opportunity to go, I don't really know that I like this. And I'm a feeler, so I feel everybody's emotions too. And initially, it was a bit of a change, because I was really making my meals just for me, making them something entirely different. And I was eating on plan. The water intake that's recommended is a huge part of this, and learning how to not only just fuel our body with something clean, but also what hydration does for us. And it also keeps us full for a greater length of time, so we're satiated and don't have to have, snacks and things so much. I didn't drink water at all. I never really craved it. You can feel dehydrated a little bit, and you go get a soda. And so Diet Dr. Pepper, I'd pop one in. I'd probably have 3 or 4 of them a day. I'd have coffee regularly. And so because of, my mission statement said, I'm willing to give these things up, it became this situation where all of a sudden these new habits all at once were overwhelming. It was a lot of work. And so every morning I'd get up and I'd already have a plan, because the journaling that you've given us straight out in phase 1 teaches us to, talk about our water intake that we're going to do every day, talk about our breakfast, lunch, and dinner, our go-to meals and things like that, and what that's going to look like. So those really prepared me for success straight out in front of me without me having to make a lot of decisions in the spur of the moment. Because, in the spur of the moment, we go, fast food really looks good right now. Or, oh, there's a snack over there that I've had before that I might want to grab. So that was vital for me. I think the journaling was a huge step towards success for me. And then, the exercises, I was scared to death because even though I have been a physical person in the past with, exercise in high school, I really never did anything past college, like tennis or softball that I'd done. I played basketball as a kid, but even then I was kind of overweight and never fit, nor had I ever been given a lot of instruction on how to do that. Exercises, the Ep13 and the full body fitness, and those really were excellent in how they were laid out. I didn't have to follow a video, which gave me the freedom to modify things if I needed to and not feel overcome or defeated by the fact that I couldn't do push-ups straight out, at the very beginning. So that was good, learning what that looked like for me, learning that if I did it once, I could do it again. And by the end of that first 2 weeks, I was not feeling like I had to barf when I did the Ep13 every time. So that was good. I could see strides being made very early on, even if it wasn't entirely on the scale, which is great because, the program emphasizes non-scale victories are huge. And sometimes they're bigger than the ones on the scale that you get on every morning and look at. So,
that's a beautiful answer. And I want to pause and just highlight a few things that I think are really important. In the beginning, when we're making changes, especially deep-seated changes to our lives and our routines, it can be overwhelming because we're like shaking a lot of things up. There's a lot of emotions behind this. And so for you found that the fact that there was some structure that you could hang on that gave you clarity where you didn't have to do the thinking is huge. And I've come to realize like this is the biggest thing, because when you start with structure, you can start to see some results and some energy in the proper direction. And then it becomes self-reinforcing in time. Like I imagine now the fact that you feel so good and you move your body and you exercise and you eat right. It's like those are self-reinforcing habits and behaviors, but it wasn't like that in the beginning. It takes some time for that to become like this positive feedback loop. So the structure is a huge thing. 2, I think you also very artfully navigated the fact that you were doing this for yourself, but you also were respecting your family. I think it's an obstacle for a lot of people knowing that there's many different people at the house eating different things, but you committed to yourself enough that you were worth it to like take these extra steps, have your extra food and dinners. And I'm curious, before we continue, how has your family's life kind of changed in this process of like from the beginning when you're like, you got this Fit Mother recipe book and you're starting to make new things to like, what are they eating now? How has your family come along or not come along or on the journey?
I'll make a point of saying that very early on, there were some struggles with the recipes and things like that I didn't know exactly how I was going to put them into our days and things like that. And Claire had to constantly remind me that this entire process took a level of flexibility that I had not really given myself in the past. So, be flexible in what you're doing on your meals. So for some meals, I would make a couple of different carbs and I would say, these are the options you can have. I would make a couple of different types of protein. And so, eventually they got to where they also kind of took some ownership of that and not only trying a lot more vegetables than they would have ever done on their own. And so that was a process of educating them as well, which was fantastic because it meant that my journey wasn't just about me. It wasn't self-centered. It was about, the concentric circles of dropping a pebble in a puddle and seeing the ripple effect of that. My husband joined Fit Father and has not embraced the physical aspect of it with the workouts as much as he has the nutrition. And because that's such a huge part at 80% of this journey, he's lost 25 pounds and done fantastic on that. And he still eats regularly the same way that I do without having, the exercise aspect of it. So I think for people that are scared of the aspect of exercise and the physicality of that, and I just can't do it. You can even, until you're brave enough to do it, the nutrition part of it is huge. And once you get that under your belt, if you can do that, that'll get you a long way to losing weight and living a lot healthier. And so in the process of all this happening, my husband, my children have done better. They eat a lot more of what I eat nowadays, and I keep a lot less in the house. That gives them the opportunity to eat kind of off plan. So, desserts and things like that used to really trigger the eating around the house kind of nonchalantly has dropped significantly. So that's good for me too.
It's very good. It's very good for everyone. Now, when you set out, you lost over 90 pounds, around 228, 230 down to like 135 ish.
Yeah.
Did you realize that this is how much weight you wanted to lose? Or was it like, man, I just want to lose my first 15 to 20 pounds and we'll see where it goes from there? What was your mindset like in the beginning as you're starting the program?
As a young adult, I had hit about 145, 150 right out of college. And I thought that was probably a pretty healthy weight for me. Little did I know that, I was 145, 150 without a whole lot of muscle, without a lot of fitness involved in there. So that's kind of what I anticipated going back to, because in my mid 40s, already at 44, I was looking at what's that supposed to look like for me, because I'm not going to be a 20-year-old anymore. I have a 44-year-old body. I've had 3 kids and 3 C-sections, and things like that. So I'm not going to look like, a Barbie doll in a movie. Yeah. I'm going to look like a 45-year-old that's getting fit. And so I wanted to be realistic. So I looked at about 155. And as I started going down in strides, I saw that 155 was actually a good weight if I wanted to be there, but that I could actually still continue to drop even more. So I got down to 155 and I said, I'm setting a new goal, because I actually crushed the first one. That's fantastic. I never actually dreamed in my wildest imagination that it was possible. It was possible with another project. So I thought, okay, if I can crush my first goal, I'm going to do it again. So I set it for 145 and I got down to 145 without changing anything at all. And, nice. You've heard people say, those last 10 pounds are really hard. And I thought, okay, well, what does that really mean? Because for me, I was able to continue just eating on plan and having a free meal once in a while or a free item once in a while and doing my exercises 6-7 days a week. And I was still dropping. And so I went down even further. I said, I'm going to do 140. Let's just try it, because I hit 145 again. And this is fantastic. And I feel good. And I'm in good shape physically. I have a whole lot of energy. And I don't feel like I'm giving myself any kind of detrimental changes here. So I hit 140. I decided at that point, I would just use that as my kind of maintenance spot. Yeah. And so as I moved into phase 4, I was hitting around 138 to 142, 143 on a regular basis. And I loved it. Now I've actually gone down even further. I've hit 135.6. And that's probably as low as I want to go, but it feels fantastic to be there. I get hungrier now than I used to without having a healthy snack, but that's kind of where I've been for the last probably 4 or 5 months, is between 135 and 140. So I'm pleased with that.
I want to ask you, because I think it's very relevant to what you just shared. What's been your relationship with the scale through Fit Mother Project? Obviously you're using it, but obviously you're not on this, we'll use the word a slave to this scale, or someone, or like it's not running your life. What's your relationship been like to the scale? How's that relationship changed over time? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of ladies are maybe listening to this who still have all that weight to lose. They're like, that's cool, Kristen, that you've done this, but like it doesn't even, let's talk about the scale a little bit.
The scale for me initially was really a great tool to see the progress that I was making. However, I could also really let those numbers and the fluctuations of that ebb and flow get in my head and really defeat me. And so I finally had to come to a spot where I said, you know what? I could have had less sleep last night, or I could have not had as much water as I did, or maybe my workout was really hard. And so I'm having some water retention from that. Yeah. Maybe I just haven't, used the bathroom as often. Maybe I haven't done something, quite the same as I had the couple of days before, or maybe it's a hormone shift. Maybe it's a monthly thing for women, and I'm just retaining water for that. And so I couldn't let, just the really micro changes in my weight dictate what I was doing. I did want to make sure that I was being successful. So in that process of learning how to have a really healthy relationship with the scale, I had to start going back and looking in like my app for my scale. It has a digital readout, and so I could look at a graph. And so as Ben Sterling, our head coach, will say, you have to look at that linear downward progression. And you've said it a number of times where that's what we're looking for. And so at the very beginning, I think we're also incredibly impatient to see the changes that we have been craving and desiring for so long, that we get in a hurry and it makes us frustrated by it. But I finally found a healthy relationship with my scale.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people don't want to read, a daily readout in the morning, first thing. But for me, it was really valuable in knowing that, I can have a free meal and it might cost me a couple of pounds, but in a couple of days, I'm already back to where I was before. And I can see those trends and treat them as what they are, as just the ebbs and flows of the daily life that we have. My menstrual cycle would change my weight about 3 or 4 pounds within a couple of days of starting. And, by day 5, I would start seeing the scale trend back down. And so I knew that after I had been working with that scale for, 2, 3, 4 months, I was starting to see the changes and going, oh, that's actually fantastic. And so it didn't become this thing that defeated me so much as I'm using this as one of the healthy tools that I need to keep going with this lifestyle. So that was great.
Well, that's a beautiful answer. Really, really was. And it can be a tool like it is for you. It gives you a lot of data and insight if used properly, and you're focusing on the trends. You just learn so much from your body when you do more frequent weighing, and you just see how certain things affect you. It makes you actually ask yourself some questions too, which I think is a very powerful part of the learning. Like, what happened? Was there anything here that I had some insight on? Also, you gain the skill of seeing that as the weight might spike for whatever reason it does, whether known or unknown, that it can trend back down and correct. And it gives you this skill set of being able to correct and keep on course correct. And that's really what over a span of 9-12 months, that's the skill set that keeps you in the right direction. So that's powerful. Okay. Here's what I want to talk about now. I want to talk about your actual routine. Like what a day in your life looked like. One, when you were losing your first 50 pounds, and maybe even a snapshot of what it looks like now. Get up. What are you having for meal number 1? When are you doing some exercise? What are some of your go-to lunches? Real practical stuff. I'd like to get to the point where someone listening to this can kind of get a sense of what the plan that you worked was that led you to results.
Well, I think early on, your literature recommends that you get some go-to meals. And so for breakfast in the past, I'd done muffins and, pastries and things like that. And there was so much junk in them. And I thought, this is going to simplify my life really, really fast. And so I started doing the breakfast shakes that are on plan in the recipe section of our members plan. And I tried the chocolate banana, peanut butter banana, I think, and some of the other ones, and really liked them a lot. Now I consistently do pretty much the same one, the peanut butter banana one, all the time. I stick some spinach in. That gives me an extra boost of vegetables in the course of the day. When I first started, my lunches were all the different sandwiches. There were some that were wraps and some that were sandwiches with turkey and other things. And then there was the peanut butter and jelly. And I really like peanut butter. So for me, peanut butter and jelly has now become my staple of my days. I can still throw in a wrap with some chicken in it and some mixed greens and some avocados and things like that. But really my go-to that I can do in a pinch, and I can even bring it with me places, and I don't have to worry about going out to eat when we're out. Or if I go to a friend's house and I just need something quick to eat, is the peanut butter jelly sandwich with a little drizzle of honey. And it's really, really good. Sometimes I toss a little salad on the side, and I've enjoyed it a lot. So I didn't.
Hey, Kristen, we got to pause there, because I think there's some women that are probably can't believe that you're eating bread and losing weight. I think we have a culture right now that has made it very much synonymous with anytime you have something like this, it's just not possible for you to be healthy and improve everything. But clearly you have been. So what kind of bread have you been using, and what's your relationship been like to that, having also experimented something like keto in the past?
Yeah, I really liked bread before this, rolls and biscuits and croissants and things like that. So going to only having Ezekiel bread which is a sprouted grain bread that's recommended on plan, was something I wasn't sure about. The fact that we don't use a lot of butter in this healthy lifestyle too. I used to slather it on, so in the mornings doing something like that was part of breakfast sometimes. And now about the only time that I have bread is when I do my sandwiches, and I really like it. And the Ezekiel bread brand has a few different kinds that you can use. There's a very basic one, and there's also one that has some sesame seeds on the outside and it's a little bit softer. So I alternate between those, but I keep, 4 to 6 loaves of that in my freezer at a time because it's fantastic. It's great toasted. It's great when it's just thawed out and it's a piece of bread and with avocado on it or mustard or things like that. It really sets it off as a great part of the journey without entirely giving up bread, because, sometimes it's a texture thing too. And it still gives you the freedom to feel like you're eating something really healthy without giving up something that you may have loved in the past. So
great answer. Yeah. And I mean, this is just special bread, right? It's organic, it's sprouted, it has like just amazing stuff in it. And it can make for a lot of people, this can be an absolute staple. And I'm really glad that it's a tool for you because it's something that will serve you for decades of life hence, now that this works for you. And that's really special. So you're having typically a sandwich or for lunch. Let's run through the rest of the day.
So dinners, at the very beginning, I stayed entirely on plan with the recipes that were outlined for us. I threw in some spinach and green beans once in a while, mostly asparagus though, Brussels sprouts and broccoli for my plates, for the perfect plate. I also did my complex carbs. I chose the ones I really liked, which were the brown rice. Occasionally drop in a little bit of quinoa. Sweet potatoes are one of my favorites, so I have that a lot. My family doesn't like that as much, so a lot of times I'll make my brown rice and throw in a side with them of white rice if they don't want my brown rice, and so they still have the freedom to choose those. And then for our proteins, we do a lot of just cooking them in the oven or sticking them in a pan with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, or we even grill, and that's a fantastic option to not having quite the same flavors too, because we have a smoker as well. And so we do a lot of the organic grass-fed beef, do chicken on a regular basis. My family is not huge on fish, but I really like salmon and cod and things like that. So I do that as well. My family also doesn't do a lot of shrimp. And so my husband and I can get in on that and we get it all to ourselves. So it's become a lot more doable for us, and in just having a few extra options on the table without me having to make an entirely different plate. Because at the very beginning, it was me just making my own plate and then making them something entirely different. They weren't interested in trying all these brand new meals straight up front. And so as time went, we were able to kind of incorporate those a little at a time so that there was a little more acceptance of we're just eating different now. And this is kind of the way it's going to be from now on. So,
yeah. I love how you navigated that on a couple fronts. One, I love that you had the passion and knew the importance of this. Two, do something distinctly separate for yourself off the get-go, because that's what you felt like you needed to have, like the clarity and like this simple plan to follow. And I also love that, you've over time, the drip, drip, drip on the forehead is introduced so many new healthy foods to your family. And I think it's really tactful how you did the choice option where you're like, we're building perfect plates. Here's some veggie options. Here's some carb options. And of course your family's enjoying the proteins that you're cooking in different ways. That's really beautiful how that works.
Thank you.
Any go-to snacks? I mean, I know you mentioned lunch. Were you having a snack? So were you having breakfast shake and then lunch and then a snack or then dinner?
There are most days where I do at home meal plans. So I do 10:30, 2:30, and 5:30 to 6:30 sometime right
So you're fasting, for those listening, you're fasting until 10:30 typically now. Okay.
Yes. So once dinner is done, I don't have anything else except maybe some water. Occasionally I'll have a little bit of decaf coffee or something like that. But the rest of the time I'm doing the intermittent fasting between dinner and breakfast the next day. There are times though when I have, a schedule during the course of the week with school and things like that where I need to do the on the go. And so I kind of alternate between those based upon what my schedule is. So a lot of times I'll do the 8 to 12 and then I'll have a snack mid-afternoon and then dinner. And usually my snacks look like nuts. And so I like walnuts and cashews and pecans, kind of a quarter of a cup. And then I'll usually do some beef jerky. Sometimes I toss in a little bit of an apple, but I really actually prefer the salty snacks to the sweeter ones right now. So, which is a strange change for me because I used to really enjoy a lot more fruit and a lot more, sugary snacks. And now they're not something I crave. So, when I stick fruit in, it's a special treat and makes me feel like I'm still getting that wonderful aspect of, balance in the diet without having to eat a whole lot of it. So
nice. Last question on your routine. When was it convenient for you to get exercise in? And how did you start to build your habits and your momentum with your workouts?
Easiest for me, I think, mentally to get up at the very beginning of the day. And so I get up and I start drinking my water and I do my devotional, and then I go straight to working out. And I have a cottage, which is a little bit of a kind of a guest residence out in our backyard. It used to be a horse barn that was converted into a kind of an efficiency apartment. And so I kind of took that over and made it our workout space. And so my best friend only lives about 6 miles from me. So she and I would work out together every morning without fail, usually between 6 and 7 o'clock, sometimes 7 and 8 o'clock. But we get that done, as soon as we could. I have found over the course of time that if I wait later in the day to do it, like mid-afternoon or in the evening, I just, the motivation to do it really kind of goes away. And then I can talk myself out of doing the exercise because I'm like, you know what, it's close enough to tomorrow. I'm just going to wait until tomorrow to do it. And I have had to just make myself always do it first thing in the morning, even when I have a day off or don't have anything else planned. And then because I get it done, I feel the sense of accomplishment and I can check it off my list, and I can't talk myself out of it because I haven't had enough time in the day to talk myself out of it or anything else to happen. So
that's a powerful insight. I think for people that do feel like morning workouts are best for them, it's just such a powerful time to do it because you just get it in. You can be very consistent, and you also get trained the more you exercise to approach things that are quote unquote hard. You do hard things and you accomplish things regularly, and that changes your mindset quite a bit when you're doing hard things and then you're feeling good afterwards because you accomplish them and then you're seeing changes. So this is a nice segue into the mental aspect of this. I'd love for you to share, as you're going through your journey, some of the different stages of mental shifts. First off, I'd like to talk about like your feeling with your own body, your self-love and feeling with your own body. How was that in the beginning? How did that change throughout the journey? And what are like the snapshots along the way?
At the very beginning of my Fit Mother journey, I really loathed the way I looked. I didn't like looking in the mirror. It affected my intimacy with my husband because I just kind of hated myself. And I really was very discouraged by the fact that I continued to increase in sizes on my clothing. So I was in a size 18 going into a 20 pretty easily at 235 pounds in May of a year ago. That's discouraging, first and foremost, to look around and see that there are clothes in my closet that I've worn that are multiple sizes lower than that. So it was motivation to get going. From there, I think really it only improved because as I started to see the changes, I started to have more energy. I started to have a different mindset about things. I saw that I could be really proactive for my own health. It was very empowering. Before, I just felt completely defeated. And so going into this, I really think that the biggest transformation for me, even early on, was a mental one. Because I started to really take responsibility for the fact that I had a lack of self-control and discipline in the way I eat. Some of my other habits, like what I drank for hydration, were not good for me. They were just essentially extra meals worth of calories without having any significant, fuel for my body. So those things were things I had to change the way I related to food. And I think in one of your Fit Father Project podcasts, you talk about how food really is fuel, and you wouldn't put, really lousy fuel in a really expensive sports car. So why would you do that to your own body? For me, that kind of resonated because I knew that that's exactly what I had been doing. I had been doing a lot of things that allowed me some instant gratification. They tasted good. And I think it's an American thing too, to feel entitled to whatever we want. And so for me, I realized that even though I felt entitled to have whatever I wanted as an adult, it wasn't that I couldn't afford it. Wasn't because I wanted to prevent myself from having it. I didn't want to restrict myself before. And now I'm seeing, in this process as I get going in Fit Mother Project, it wasn't about restricting myself. It was just about making some really good decisions that were far better for me than where I was. And so that mentality has just grown over time because, going into phase 4 and seeing the personal and mental growth aspect of it that we get to sit and focus on in some of our life wheel aspects, being able to see those things, you can get even better. You can still have a ton of variety in your food and in your lifestyle. And also look how much more that you can do than you used to be able to do because you've lost weight, you're fit, so now I do things with my children, getting on the trampoline. They're like, what? You're going to jump on the trampoline? And used to, I'd be at a point where I was like, I'm scared to do that because I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt. So I may be a 46-year-old, but I feel like I'm in my 20s again, and actually better because I've never been fit in my entire life. And I finally feel like I can own that label. I'm a fit mother.
You certainly are.
That's fantastic. So it's great.
It is fantastic. And as you're sharing, I had a visual. It's like a giant snowball that is rolling over a peak. It's either rolling backwards or forwards. And like the backwards roll is when we're doing self-destructive behaviors that we know aren't good for us. And then we just keep on doing that. And that's like that negative momentum that spirals us deeper until we hit some rock bottom point where we're like, I'm going to shift this. And now you're on the other side of this thing, and you've generated so much of this positive momentum where you're stacking up all these moments and experiences, like jumping on the trampoline with your family, all the different NSVs, all the friends you've made through Fit Mother Project, all the different weight milestones. And these are like things that have grabbed onto that snowball, and it's bigger and stronger, and it just adds to your momentum. So I think time is one of the things. So like if you work a plan like this, and you accumulate more wins, scale victories, non-scale victories, moments, it's recreating you in a new way. And I love how you shared that from the basis of your physical transformation, you've used the Fit Mother Project to really look at all the other areas of your life and try to be better all over the place. I think that's really meaningful. Now, you mentioned a couple things, and I'm a very deeply spiritual person. I have a profound relationship to God, and I believe a lot of this comes from that place for me. And I think it's special that you found your first little bit omen and inspiration in church. And you also mentioned that you have a morning devotional that you do. I'm curious to ask you how have in your shifts with your spirituality and your connection to what you believe and what you feel to be true throughout this process of getting healthier. Like, how has this really played out in the spiritual domain, if you're open to sharing?
Absolutely. For me, there was a lot of spiritual dissatisfaction that I had at the time because I just didn't like myself. And because I chose in so many spaces of my life to feed my negative response to life, my discouragement, feelings of depression, I knew that I wasn't relying on God for my contentment, my filling, my satisfaction. And so for me, I had turned to some other places in my life that I thought could fill me. And they weren't. In fact, they were doing the exact opposite. They were actually killing me. Going from there, where I was dissatisfied emotionally and physically and spiritually in some places, I've had a renewed sense of purpose and what He can do with me by finding strength and by finding some self-control and by finding some discipline. But I really also feel like there were a lot of times where I was in the middle of a workout and I would just cry. I'd sit on the floor and say, God, can you please help me get through this? Because I cannot do this on my own strength. It's impossible for me to do it today. I'm not emotionally there. I'm physically spent. And there were so many times where I was able to get back up, do it, finish my workouts or finish the day, and really find some joy and satisfaction in being able to do all that. And I think my drive, first and foremost, for this entire change in me was spiritual, because I knew that I was sort of making a mess of my life and really wanted some direction to see that change. So
totally. What a beautiful answer. I feel like the word that comes up to mind as I hear you share this is alignment. Like, I think oftentimes when the body's not healthy, we don't feel like we're in alignment, especially when we're doing self-destructive behaviors and the emotional components tied up in there. And then you're able to like get everything aligned, where I believe our connection to God is starts at this heart of like self-love. Like, if we don't have love of ourselves, it's tough to really have a deep spiritual connection. So I'm very glad that you've created that intentionally through the hard work. And it's not to say that when we put our faith and rely on God, that we're not all there sweating it out and doing the work. Like, we have bodies that are built on action, right? We must take action, but the inner strength that you can derive from what you believe is really profound. So I would love to change gears towards the end of this conversation and ask you to give yourself or a new fit mom who's just getting started some advice on from the vantage point of you having gone through a truly profound 360-degree transformation, having lost a substantial amount of weight. What would you say are the words of wisdom that are important for someone to hear in the first phase of their journey? And then I'd love for you to also give words of advice after the fact for someone who's maybe where you're at right now. So maybe words of advice to yourself, someone who has run the run, has lost the weight, and now you're in this new kind of phase. Let's start off with the newbies, and then we'll move on to where you're at.
So for the newbies, I would say the most important part is using the tools that Dr. Anthony has given us. Go back and read the meal plan. Go all the way from the very beginning to the end. Don't skip out, because you're doing yourself a disservice, because what you've allowed us to do through this process is enable ourselves to do it and take care of ourselves. You've started with a library, kind of a tool belt of ways that we can just set out, learn how to do it on our own, and learn it in the safety of our community within Facebook. And I would say that, a big part of doing this successfully is, number one, believing that it's not going to happen overnight. We didn't get here where we were in a day. It's not going to happen overnight. Be patient with yourself. Be gracious, because it's hard work. And I know that people are scared of hard work. So don't be scared of it. Just be courageous, take a breath, and start and do as much as you can. And every day that you keep showing up and you keep doing it, you're going to start believing in yourself more. So keep doing that. The hydration aspect of it. I hear a lot of people say, I cannot drink 120, 130 ounces, 140 ounces of water in the course of the day. You know what? I was that person, and I can do it now. And it took some time, and it took some, I went through a number of water bottles, and I'm a very visual person. So I found one that, I can actually see through it. So I can see the progress that I'm making in the course of the day. And that made a huge difference for me. I tracked it on my journaling page. So for me, the journaling was a huge benefit for me, because I could actually, visually sit down and see what I was doing in the course of the day. And I would already have a plan for myself as soon as I woke up that morning. I already know what workout I'm going to do. I already know I'm going to have my shake. I already know what, meals I'm going to prepare for the rest of the day. I'm setting myself up for success by doing that. And I think finally, being a part of the Fit Mother Facebook community, I know a lot of people are really starting to steer away from some of the social communities, the social media like Instagram and Facebook. But for me, that community was a huge part of my success. The Zoom calls every couple of weeks that Amy Spock had were a wonderful part of getting to know other people that were doing this with me. Diane O'Brien is a spitfire and fantastic. And she finally had to say, Kristen, butter is not a spice. So you can't use that in your spices when you cook anymore. She giggled at me, but I was like, butter has been a spice for me, butter and salt, and pepper every once in a while. So, growing that part of us and learning how to do this was wonderfully played out in the Facebook page for Fit Mother and the Alpha chapter. People post recipes, and you can get all sorts of answers to questions from people who have already done this walk. And so for me, in the first 30 days, that was enormous to my success and my encouragement and my confidence to be able to do it, because I was actually literally seeing other people that had done it. I think now people who are doing it here, I would say keep making goals, because if you're not making new goals for yourself and attaining those, you can start to stagnate again. And I think this lifestyle, just like lots of other disciplines in our lives, takes a personal responsibility and intentionality to start it again every single day. In my faith walk, I get up every morning and I read a devotional and I read my Bible and I pray. And that has to be an intentional part of my faith in order to continue this strong relationship with Christ that I have, and to prevent me from falling away from what I know to be, truth in my life in the Bible. So in the same regard, I think this Fit Mother lifestyle has to be something that you start every single morning committing to again. I didn't stop at August 31st. I had to again make that commitment to do this lifestyle on September 1st. And then I did it again on September 2nd. And I journaled, and I was a part of the Fit Mother, community again, and I would
Yeah.
ask the questions. I didn't want to be afraid to do that. And so even now, going back to present where I am, I'm still a part of the Diamond group, which is a phase 4 group of ladies that have done this.
Yeah.
And I still really enjoy being able to fellowship with them and seeing where their new goals are set and things like that. Because I think if you don't set yourself goals, then I think you're going to completely stall out, or you're at least going to do yourself a disservice. Because, once I got to phase 4 in the summer and I moved over, then I was able to do things like strength months where I found a new passion for getting excited to lift weights. I'd never lifted a barbell with plates on it in my life. College was the last time I tried to do that, and I just lifted the bar. So it's exciting to see yourself be able to tackle new challenges and to be able to do this successfully. But I think also to be able to see the other women and even men in these communities succeed, it is empowering, not just on a personal level, but it's empowering, in the lifestyle that we've created to, across the board, seeing our families grow, seeing our friends succeed. And I definitely have some fantastic friends in this community that I've made, Nicole Benzel and my best friend, Claire Dorn, and Steph Plazier, and, fantastic people like Amy Spock and Diane O'Brien. And, they've become family to me because they have such wisdom and insight, and it's exciting to be able to tackle these new places with them. So
what a beautiful answer on both fronts. I don't think any more needs to be said. I think it's because what you shared today touched on so many different dimensions of our being. Certainly the habits, the physical actions, the mental side of committing to something, getting clear on what needs to be done, the emotional side of starting before you even necessarily have the full courage, but going through the journey, feeling the feelings, getting stronger every day. And then the community aspect too, of doing this around like-minded people is a way to like borrow strength early in your journey and also to give it back later on, because it's like this cycle of both giving and receiving where I think our cup gets filled up so much. And it's just a pleasure to have you on here, Kristen. Thank you so much for being a fit mother, for working this plan, because ultimately all the information in the world just sits on the internet as a PDF. It needs to be taken by somebody like you who's willing to watch this, print it out, look at how this can apply into your life, and now you're doing it. And I wish you decades and decades of health, wealth, happiness for yourself and your family. Thank you so much for being a fit mother and for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.